So one important sort of philosophical consideration is whether perception, that sort of conscious appreciation, of various aspects of our environment, both external and internal, is actually essential for survival or essential at all. So one of the things is that there are many organisms, for example, that respond to specific stimuli with very specific kinds of, stereotyped sort of behavioral responses. And there's a wonderful biologist, E.O. Wilson, who did tremendous work exploring both the physiology and the behavior of ants. He's like one of the foremost specialists on ants. And there's a very entertaining kind of description he gives of how he explored how ants respond to ants that die within the anthill, like within the actual ant colony. For the first 2 days or so, after an ant dies, the other ants just sort of walk right over it and don't seem to be aware of it at all. And yet, after about 2 days, anytime an ant encounters this 2-day dead ant, it will immediately grab it and bring it outside of the colony and toss it outside. So what's going on here? Like, what happens after 2 days? And as part of the decomposition of that ant, there are chemicals that are generated. And many species, many organisms are actually very driven by olfaction. We're rather unique in that we are very visually and auditorily oriented to our environments. However, Wilson tested out, many different compounds to see which ones were producing that specific kind of behavioral response, and he identified it. It's something called oleic acid, and there's a very entertaining description. But what you have to think about is that just the detection of that particular chemical provokes the grab the ant, throw it out response. So there's a very stereotyped behavioral response. We'll see later there's a famous kind of organism known as the mantis shrimp, right, that has 14 different specialized photoreceptors for different, wavelengths of light. And yet, the mantis shrimp has very specific behavioral responses to, each one of those, detection events. Like if there's, for example, like a red, detection like this wavelength, like a long wavelength of electromagnetic radiation within that range, it attacks it. It attacks something, right? So basically, whether there's a perceptual experience, a conscious perceptual experience that's associated with these sensory detection events, that's not always clear. And I want us all to consider, how many sort of automatic, unconscious sorts of responses we make, often very stereotyped responses to incoming sensory detection events, without necessarily being fully conscious, of what's going on.